The Obama administration's rebalancing policy in the Asia-Pacific region has created some tension between China and the United States. So is Washington's Asia pivot undermining regional security in the Pacific rather than making it more stable? Joining me now with their take on the situation, Walter Lohman, director of the Asian Studies Center at the Heritage Foundation here in Washington, D.C., and from Beijing, Su Xiaohui, a research fellow at the China Institute of International Studies. I want to welcome both of you to The Heat. Thanks so much for talking to us today. Now, the Obama administration says the current policy is just a renewed focus on the Asia-Pacific region. And why don't we start in Beijing? Is this really a renewed focus, and did the U.S. ever leave the Pacific region?
Well, as for me, a renewed focus is not the accurate word. I believe, as the U.S. said, that the country is always a resident power in the region. The only thing that changed is the focus of its strategy. As the return to Asia proposed in 2009 and carried out in the recent 2 years, and we have witnessed a lot of changes in the region. And in this year, the U.S. began to realize that this term may cause some misunderstanding, and they readjust the word to a rebalance, which I believe is more accurate and correct for the situation. So I believe that in the future, the U.S. will involve more in this region.
Okay, now, Walter, I see you nodding your head. You agree?
I do agree. The rhetoric about the return to Asia and we're back in Asia and this sort of thing that the Obama administration rolled out early on was largely that. It was rhetoric, and it was aimed at really domestic constituencies in the U.S. I think it was a mistake to frame it that way because I agree with Ms. Su. The U.S. never left Asia. It's been involved there, in its current capacity as sort of guarantor of security and public goods there, since World War II.
Let me ask you this: how much of this is a result of pressure or lobbying on the U.S. by its allies? Let's say the Philippines, Singapore, Australia, Japan, Vietnam, you name them. It seems like that these are the people that they're out spending. The Obama administration spending a lot of time with these allies. Do you think that that's what's driving this lobbying on their part?
Well, I mean, I think that that is in large part what has spiked American engagement in the region. In that sense, we are more engaged in regional institutions. We're attending the ARF regularly. We've established new multilateral bodies in the region and gotten increasingly involved in those. And I think that is really at the urging of our allies in the region and even the Vietnamese, who are increasingly worried about regional stability and think that the U.S. plays a constructive role in guaranteeing it.
Su Xiaohui, let me get your thoughts on that. Is this basically lobbying on the parts of these countries that's really drawing the United States in?
Well, I believe that our neighboring countries, they are kind of concerned of China's development. As you know, in recent years, China has made great progress in our economic development, and our neighbors are concerned that how China will perform in the future as an emerging power. And the U.S. involvement in this region will help these countries to feel that the great powers are kind of balancing each other, and they will feel safer. And some countries, especially the Philippines and Vietnam, are expecting the U.S. power to balance China, especially in the disputed issues such as the South China Sea issue. But I don't think these countries' expectation is the main reason for the U.S. to make its rebalance strategy. And the U.S. has its own consideration.
Well, Walter, let me ask you that. Do you think they're trying to use the USA as a proxy in the area then?
I do agree that they are using, or they see value in the U.S. serving as a balance in the region, and they're bringing the U.S. in closer for some reassurance, especially on their dealings with China. I think what's lost on a lot of the day-to-day headlines in the Global Times and New York Times and this sort of thing is that the countries in the region want the U.S. there. They want us pushing back against China a little bit. They also want to see the U.S. and China getting along. But to the extent we don't, that concerns them.
Well, let me ask you then, putting a military presence in Australia, as they've talked about, some of these things that they're doing, does that help to ease tensions or increase them? And I'll start with you, Walter.
Well, it's a fine balance, but I would say for the most part, what we've done there is largely symbolic. I mean, they involve, thousands of Marines in the case of Australia, 2,500 Marines, but in the overall scheme of things, as far as Australia is away from China, it's mostly a symbolic effort to demonstrate our commitment to the region. It's the same with the littoral combat ships that we're deploying to Singapore. 2 littoral combat ships in Singapore, maybe as many as 4. I mean, compared to the presence of the 7th Fleet in Japan and our facilities in Hawaii and Guam and elsewhere, it's not a really big deal.
Well, Su Xiaohui, he's describing it as not a big deal, but do you see it as increasing tensions or diminishing them?
Well, as you know, China believes that the U.S. rebalance is kind of targeting China. And we believe that the U.S. is trying to regulate China's behavior. And on this basis, the U.S. would like to play a leading role in the region. So we see several aspects of this rebalance. Security, economic, and political aspects. And up to now, the security aspect is most obvious, as we have witnessed a lot of evidences.
Well, let me.
So it makes China feel kind of, nervous.
Su Xiaohui, we only have a couple minutes left, but I want to direct this question at you, and then I'll give Walter a chance to respond. Does the U.S. presence help with the South China Sea disputes, or does it muddy it a little bit more, would you say?
Well, for the South China Sea, as you may notice that in the recent ARF serial meetings, and the U.S. Played an important role actually in these meetings. We felt that the ASEAN countries are concerned about their separation, about their division in the positions. And China is also worried about the role of the U.S. and the role of some countries in the ASEAN. China wants to maintain stability and unity in this region, and China wants the ASEAN countries to play a leading role in the regional affairs. And we hope that the related countries will act with restraint and work together with China to promote the development of the region. And so we are paying attention to the U.S. role behind some related countries, and we hope that the U.S. will play a responsible role and help the related countries to calm down and to work for the stability in the region together.
Walter, let me give you the last word on this. You think that the United States presence there helps with these disputes or hinders them?
Well, I think it does help if what you're looking for is an equitable solution to the problem. If you're looking for just peace, then we can all agree that it's China's waters and we can all go home. But if you're really looking for an equitable peace, then the U.S. has to be there to help balance the scales in favor of equality and to give the other claimants some seat at the table, and that's what the U.S. I think does. If I could just end very quickly on the primary U.S. interest here is freedom of navigation, and that's why it's important that all this is focused on the South China Sea, because we're not sure of what the Chinese claim is. If they're claiming all the South China Sea, then the U.S. Navy and merchant ships and merchant ships of the region are just there at Chinese forbearance. If they have a claim that's legal and that can be discussed among all the claimants, then it's a different story.
We're about out of time, but I do want to give you a chance to respond to what he just said.
Well, I believe that China is consistent with the U.S. position that we want to maintain stability in the South China Sea, and we will guarantee free and harmful passing on the waters. But what we need to emphasize is our sovereignty and territorial integrity. And the related countries cannot deny history and cannot obtain what don't belong to them. That is China's point. China will not be aggressive and assertive in what we should not claim, but we will have to defend our national sovereignty.
We're going to have to end it.
That is our core interests.
We're going to have to end it there. I'm sorry, we've run out of time. Su Xiaohui, thank you so much for joining us from Beijing. And
My pleasure.
Walter Lohman, thank you so much for joining us here in the studio.
Glad to do it.